Hey everyone, and welcome back to a new video. So we're about to see a new wave of Warhammer previews this Saturday, the 22nd of August, and I have to say, I can't believe the pace of some of these announcements. Even just a year ago, we'd wait with bated breath for any hint of a new model or update, and these days we seem to get them almost every fortnight. We've had Space Marine and Necron stat lines being shared, or leaked I should say, from the new 9th edition boxes, which has me excited for all number of reasons, not least because my firstborn Imperial Fist army is now actually competitive again, but we've also had a consistent amount of community posts covering the full breadth of the hobby. Lord of the Rings, for example, is getting as much love as ever, despite this arguably being 40k's moment to shine. Games Workshop hasn't dropped the ball, and we're getting new model previews from across the Warhammer spectrum every week, and indeed a ton more this weekend. But in this video, I'm not so much speculating on what we'll see in the previews, but rather focusing on two particular Age of Sigmar Rumour Engines that could be revealed either at this event or in the not too distant future. And here are those two teasers. Now, one jumped out at me immediately, and it probably should given I've done quite a few videos on this character already, but the other came to my attention on Twitter, and I want to thank Sir Percival for sharing this. Now, who are these characters, you ask? Well, I think these images hint at the appearance of King Brodd, leader of the Sons of Behemat, and Malerion, formerly Malekith, the Witch King of Naggaroth and leader of the Dark Elves in the Old World, and I want to spend a bit of time talking about each of these potential reveals in turn, starting with King Brodd. In my first video about the Sons of Behemat, I wrongly suspected that King Brodd was being hinted at with this rumour engine. My thinking was that this was his ceremonial staff, which is described in the lore as being from an old Behematian temple that once crested Torcrania. Unfortunately, I was wrong on this occasion. This is actually from the Gatebreaker model, but given how awesome this model looks, I can't say I'm annoyed in the slightest. However, when it comes to skulls like the one we see here, there is a much clearer connection to King Brodd. In the lore, he's said to wear a mole dragon skull as a crown, and Games Workshop has clearly emphasised that element up until now. This next photo is taken from the Sons of Behemat War Scroll in the 2016 God Beast supplement, where you can field an entire unit of Gargants, one of which is selected to take the role of the Gargant King. As you can see though, the design team has gone out of their way to depict Brodd himself with his distinctive skull crown and pillar of office. I won't labour the point, but what I want to get across is that King Brodd has a very distinctive look, and that involves wearing an enormous skull for a crown. Now, if this were coming out a year ago, I might not have made that link at first, but given the Lumineth Realm Lords are out in the open and the path is now clear for the Sons of Behemat to be fully previewed and released, I think we're now starting to see some of the characters that will flesh out their battle tome, and where better to start that than with their leader, King Brodd. Now, if the other Sons of Behemat models are anything to go by, then Brodd is going to be a colossal character, and one that is going to be incredibly powerful on the tabletop. In the God Beast War Scroll, the model playing Brodd was allowed to make its full number of attacks regardless of the wounds it had suffered, so as the book points out, with a massive club he'd be getting 18 attacks on his own. I fully expect that in time we'll see that his rules are just as devastating. There'll likely be a huge focus on cleave attacks that affect whole units, and coupled with his likely 10-inch plus movement, he's going to be able to pressure every corner of the battlefield. But if the detail and depth of these models is anything to go by, I think what I'm looking forward to most is seeing the colossal weight of Brodd conveyed with his sculpt. The Gatebreaker in particular has so much kinetic energy to it, you can feel the weight of the pillar just by looking at the posture of the Gargant, and I hope we see something similar with Brodd. In 40k though, many characters typically get rather static poses, and I do see the positives in that, the sense of command coming through confidently and passively, but I personally prefer models in the thick of action because that's where they usually end up, and I just feel they look all the better for it. I want to see Brodd in that same way, hefting his pillar high to crush the mortals scrambling about his feet, or maybe bellowing at them with a roar fitting of those whose lineage stems back to one of the mightiest god beasts in the mortal realms. Either way, I hope we get to see the rich emotion that is apparent on the other Mega Gargants, but to a greater extent with Brodd, which allows him to shine as a centrepiece in an army full of them. I'm confident we'll see that, and in truth he'll look amazing however the design team has gone about it, but I really can't wait to see the community's reaction to this towering Behemoth when he is finally revealed, and equally when we discover what his place in the story will be. Despite having done several videos on the Sons of Behemat, I'm no real expert on them, and this battle tome is a great opportunity to establish both their history and the direction they're going in. As presumably a destruction faction, who are they allied with and what conquest will they be setting their eyes on? The lore does suggest though that Brodd has a personal mission to rebuild the temple to his father Behemat and to wreak vengeance on the beastmen that tore it down. So maybe Chaos could be the first major antagonist to the Sons of Behemat as they seek to rebuild part of their lost civilization. But closing off my thoughts on Brodd, I do wonder how their release will differ from others. I might be mistaken, but I can't see the new models being packaged into an affordable box set like the Lumineth Realm Lords, not without offering one heck of a discount. No, if anything, I sense we might indeed see a package set with the Battle Tome tokens and other collectibles, since Games Workshop does like to kick off a new launch with those, but at most, I guess we can only expect to have a single Gargant to keep it affordable. After all, given these are the Imperial Knights of Age of Sigmar, I think their prices will be in the same region too. Naturally, that relies on Games Workshop bringing out the standalone boxes relatively soon after, but given their propensity for keeping models behind exclusive box sets for a while, I sadly can't see that happening. I guess I'm just a bit curious as to how the Sons of Behemat launch might look, given that they're not a conventional faction. Hopefully we'll find out during the preview event, but with so many great models already revealed and hopefully one more at least on the way, I really do hope that us hobbyists aren't bottlenecked out of collecting another exciting addition to the range. Now let's turn to Malerion, and this teaser has me incredibly excited to say the least. I briefly talked about Malerion in my recent video on the new edition of Age of Sigmar, which is almost certain to come out next year, but he's still a character that is quite literally shrouded in mystery. As a bit of a recap, after the events of the end times in Warhammer Fantasy, the being formerly known as Malekith awoke in the realm of Ulgu in a shapeless state. Malerion was furious at his predicament and the events that had brought him there, and that fury briefly allowed him to take a solid form, a revelation of his newfound godly powers and the journey he needed to take to master them. Over time, he came across many of his enemies from the world that was, his mother Morathi, who he struck a truce with, and soon after Sigmar, who offered both a place in his pantheon. But it was Malerion's journey to the underworlds of Shyish that presented the former Witch King with his most unlikely partnership, one with the former prodigies of the High Elves, now the twin gods of Hysh, Tyrion and Teclis. Together the elven gods crafted a plot to trap Slaanesh, who had devoured many of their elven kin during the end times, and to rebirth their race anew in the mortal realms. Presently, Malerion sits as the master of Ulgu and any who reside there, biding his time, watching for the merest hint of betrayal from those who would consider themselves his allies, and scheming towards a goal that is as obscure as the very mists that blanket his realm. That's a very rough recap, but do check out some of the lore surrounding Malerion if you're interested. He was definitely one of the more complex characters in Warhammer Fantasy, and the foundations they've laid in Age of Sigmar give me the sense that he's not going to be any less complex going forward. But let's turn to the model because, and I want to be upfront here, I don't think this model is specifically Malerion, but it is nonetheless hinting at his arrival in Age of Sigmar. If we compare this hand to Malerion's, there's a clear similarity. These ghoulish, slender fingers are rather distinct and seem in proportion to what we see in the artwork. However, Malerion's hands don't have this webbed skin between the fingers, nor does this model have the claws that jut out from Malerion's forearm, and this is why I think that we're looking at a follower of Malerion rather than the character himself. Some of you may be thinking that this could be a new Flesh Eater Courts model, and I certainly see the possibility, but I'm hesitant to think that myself, and for two key reasons. Firstly, this skull seems slightly off for a Flesh Eater's character. They normally revel in the gore and gruesome remains of their victims, and this skull looks a little too clean for their faction. And secondly, if it was a new Flesh Eater's character, I'm wondering how Games Workshop would publish the rules for such a model. In the past, most new models in 40k have come with a campaign publication or a new codex, anything to make a bit of money you could say. So in the absence of a campaign, which I would love to see, I'm not sure that this is a new model for an existing faction. Rather, I do think Games Workshop is possibly lining up a revised Dark Elves faction to sit opposite the newly released Lumineth. This doesn't just work well from a tabletop perspective, but also from a lore one. As the realm of Hysh and the elves that reside there begin to exert their dominance, it makes sense that their polar opposite do the same, or at least seek to keep their current balance in check. But let's stick with the lore because I want to explain why else this model could be a follower of Malerion. We know from the core rulebook that after Slaanesh was captured and the souls of the devoured elves were extracted, many fled to Ulgu. However, as we can see with the Idoneth Deepkin and the Daughters of Cain, being consumed by Slaanesh for any period of time doesn't do great things for your physical form, and that's why those factions appear as warped versions of the purer Hyshian elves, possessing bat-like wings and pale aquatic complexions. In addition, when Malerion first started to wander the realm of Ulgu, he found all manner of creatures within it, and it states that he discovered his mother, Morathi, when he came across a writhing coven of shadow demons, perhaps not too dissimilar from what we see here. In short, the elves that follow Malerion are bound to be corrupted too, and we can even presume that just as many Daughters of Cain models mimic Morathi's serpent-like form, Malerion's brethren will also mimic his appearance. That would explain the similarities, but also the slight discrepancies. I could go on and try and unpick the connotations of the skull, but part of the skill in these Rumour Engines is that they leave a lot of room for wild speculation, and I don't want to go too far down a route that I'm not entirely convinced by. What I do remain confident of, however, is that Malerion's plot will come to the fore soon, since it's very hard to see how Teclis and Tyrion's stories can fully realise their potential without their arch nemesis making his appearance too. And again, Malerion is a really interesting character, and as we head towards Age of Sigmar's 3rd edition next year, I do feel that the time is right for his plans to come to some sort of cataclysmic fruition. So that's my thoughts on these two specific Rumour Engines, but we'll have to wait and see if anything comes of it either this weekend or in the months that follow. Let me know what you think about them in the comments below, whether you agree, and what are your expectations for King Brodd and Malerion's models. Personally, I'm pretty confident of King Brodd coming soon, since he is the leader of a faction that we know is getting released later this year, but Malerion might take a little while longer. Given the pace and quality of these releases, I think I can cope with that. But as always, I want to say thank you for watching this video. Please do consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel if you enjoyed it, and I do hope to see you in the next one. But until then, take care.